Hi, Michelle. I'm so excited for you to be here and to talk with you for our fourth issue. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Ariel. It's a pleasure, really. I'm a big fan of Bloodletter. I'm so happy to be able to talk with you.
Oh my gosh. Well, we were so excited that we were able to do this, and I can't wait to talk about your work. You're a huge inspiration for me and such an enormous influence on our audience, and personally, one of
Um,
my favorite filmmakers. So I just
oh,
am
thank you
so
so much.
delighted.
It means the world. Thank you so much.
So, I want to talk to you about the role that horror plays in your work. In the past, you've described horror as a generous genre, which
Mm.
really resonated with me, but I think it might be surprising for some people. So, I wanted to ask, in what way do you feel like horror is generous?
At this, I mean, it has been so generous. It's something that I really feel like I keep saying, like, oh, yes, it is. I mean, since I started as a teenager watching films and doing short films, I feel like it's the genre that has been embracing every, like kid that maybe has no idea how to do films, that is just starting, that wants to break the rules, that is not interested in academic and all of that. It's like the genre that kind of like embrace you, in a very open way. There's no expectations. You can be playful about it. There's no, at least in the way I grew up in it, it felt like it was not this snobbish kind of like film world, that I was in film school. That it felt like a house that it was like, you can do whatever, and it's gonna be okay. And I think it comes with in hands with punk. I was in the punk scene for a long time, and I guess it was very clear for me that that was a genre that made sense for me, because I felt more freedom. And apart from actually like that process, like the process that it is, making horror films and that kind of community creates, that is really, I think, like the most loving and open, and it's and diverse and radical. Also itself, like the fiction itself in the horror genre or sci-fi, it gives you like very specific tools to give justice to very real emotions that are very hard to say on words, or like many people, we're so gaslighted by society and like everyday life. And I'm like, I love how horror gives you these literally tangible tools, like that are visual and come with sound, that give justice to those feelings, of like not being able to belong somewhere, or like these feelings of frustration or asphyxiation, that many times literally you can see a person that is silent, but then that feeling for that person is completely real. And horror gives you everything to give justice to those feelings, that are very true for humankind. So that's why I feel like it's a beautiful genre. Yeah.
That's so well put because it really seems to me like between your background with punk music and then also horror, it seems like there's a kind of catharsis that it offers, or a sense of there's something about externalizing fears and externalizing the feeling of being isolated or pushed out by society. And it seems like punk and horror have a lot in common and kind of like giving voice to that rage and those feelings of
Yeah.
discontent.
Yeah. They create this space where it's possible to talk about all of that is very uncomfortable to talk about in many other spaces, right? Like
Yeah.
it gives you this space, like go for it as much as you want. And I don't like to see it like as therapy, because that's very complicated, but then there's definitely a chance at least to express all of that many times you don't have space to do in other places, right?
Yeah.
And that's amazing, of the genre, and you get to put all of that darkness, I guess, or all of that like troubles, that you have inside in something else, and then you get to connect with other people that feel the same way with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That sense of community and of otherness together, which is really
Yes.
unique and
Yes.
special.
Yeah. And you kind of feel like less alone, maybe
Yeah.
it's not fixed, the pain is not fixed, the sadness is not fixed, but then at least you're like, okay, I'm not the only one, and that
Yeah.
happened to me with so much with Huesera, because um I guess it connected with so many people that I will never know. But then, like, after the screenings and all of that, I was like, oh my God, like I feel definitely less alone, and I feel like
Yeah.
this film like made connections that you don't have to say anything. You just see it in like some of the people that approached me after the screenings, and it's like there was a sense of community there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Of feeling seen in a way that I think is specific to the genre.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember very quickly that this moment that I have very clear in my mind that I had a screening in the outskirts of Mexico City in this other city called Toluca that is a very violent city for women. A lot of femicide over there, and this family, two teenagers and their mom, approached me like with tear eyes. You know,
Yeah,
the three of them. You could tell there was a story there. You know,
yeah,
between their mother's story and them and the relationship between the three of them, and they just grabbed my hands and said thank you, like that was it. But I could tell like there was a big thing that Huesera did for them as a family, and it
yeah.
was just so beautiful. You know, it's just these moments that is like, okay, that's why we do what we do, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's so incredible. And to be totally frank, that's absolutely how I felt because
Mm.
um maternal horror is one of the subgenres of horror that I'm the most engaged in and invested in. And there's not a lot of feminist maternal horror. You know, you see a lot of films with like the bad mom that are
Oh
so
my
like
god, yes.
prototypical, but not a lot where with such a like em empathetic and emotionally engaged story about a mother and about the horrors of motherhood. And that was something that was so specific to Huesera. And I was wondering, I read that initially, as you were writing the script, you kind of had feelings of unexpected feelings of judgment towards Valeria, and that you
Yeah.
were sort of struggling with that character. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
You know, like, so, well, so everything like the seed of Huesera started when I heard all the story about my grandmother, who was a very denied and like demonized woman in my family because
Mm,
basically she left, right? Like a long time ago, that was the only thing we knew about her, you know?
mm,
And then later in life, I started asking all those questions. I wanted to understand more of her story. You know, thanks to feminism, I was like, they're being like, okay, this shouldn't be like, you know, like good or bad kind of stuff, you know?
yeah,
And my father opened up, and I guess there was a huge catharsis there for both of us,
yeah,
and of understanding this figure, you know, and her story. And it was crazy, you know, like the whole family, I guess, inheritance of like relationships, literally your family relationships changed for me in a way, you know. I understood a lot of figures, and and I was already doing horror movies, you know, so I was like, okay, I need to give justice to these kind of characters that are so hard to give justice to because
yeah,
everybody demonizes.
yeah,
So I guess like that process took so many years, right? For us to humanize my grandma, you know, and then it's complicated many times because there's still the pain, right, of having been abandoned, and that's also very true,
yeah,
you know. So you can't stop looking at that, but then you have to be able to also look at the other side of the coin, you know. So that
yeah.
was a process that was very hard to write about, you know, like it's
Mm,
how do you take this character from this point A, literally like begging to the virgin to have a baby, you know, and then understanding why she decides to leave, you know, like all that arc. It was hard to write, but then I guess like once the character made sense and started like taking her own life, it was easy, you know, because then she existed and it was like she's a human being and she deserves to be seen. And she, so I guess it took us a long time with my co-writer to understand who that character was. She was not my grandmother 100%.
mm,
It had like things of both of us and so many other, the actress herself also when she came in, you know. And once we understood Valeria, then there was impossible to not be empathetic to her, you know. But then it was a whole long creative process in order to get to that point, you know, because of course there's a very strong demonization of someone who decides to leave a baby behind, you know, or to take that kind of decision, you know. And but then I guess that was, yeah, the beautiful challenge, you know.
yeah, absolutely. And it must have been really interesting for you because I'm sure in the kind of lore of your family, this was like a very negative figure and a figure that was associated with a lot of pain with your grandmother. And then to place yourself within her subject position and start to write from there and think about like the reasons behind it and what she gained from leaving or the reasons
Yeah.
why she had to leave. That must have been that must have been quite a journey for you emotionally.
It was. And then at first, I did got like pushback from my
Mm-hmm.
brothers. I only
Yeah.
have brothers too, so they were, for a moment, one of them particularly was very like bothered, like, why are you going into that place, like we don't want to talk about her, like you're trying to humanize this witch, literally, like basic stuff like that. But then later, all of them like got it, you know. And I guess
That's
all of
amazing.
them with little information, because I guess I'm the one that went deeply into it, and my dad as well. Like honestly, my dad already is gone, but in the moment that we had those conversations, it was very beautiful because I could see how he knew so many other things and put put her figure completely out of the demonized or like like bad person box. He
Yep.
knew all of that. He was just not, he hadn't been able yet before of that to say the whole thing, that it was way more complex, and actually in many ways she was also a victim,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so and then by now my brothers also are very impressed by her story, and are
Mhm.
like, she has a name now that she's named now we know more about her. Um and yeah, they were just like the the idea of talking about her changed radically. And it
Wow.
was not only about the movie, it was, I guess, about just literally having conversations, that are hard to have. Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, I think that the idea of a mother having an inner life and having sexuality and having negative feelings toward their child and having even a desire to leave is something that you never see portrayed on screen. And for me, I saw the movie when my daughter was about 2.
Mhm.
And as someone who's, works in a creative field, it was incredibly difficult to like grasp on to the person I used to be. And every sort of filmic or even societal portrayal of motherhood is so steeped in this vision of motherhood as like totalizing and the only sort of force in your life that you need, and the child becomes your life. And I thought you made this really, really incisive remark about Rosemary's Baby, where you said it doesn't matter that there's a group of satanic cult members around Rosemary. The moment she sees her baby, she's going to stay because apparently that's something innate in us. And I think that this film allows a mother to be ambivalent, which, it's so easy to be black and white. It's so easy to tell a story with clear morals, but ambivalence is the hardest emotion
Mhm.
to depict and to kind of live in. It's very murky, and that makes it hard. And I think for me, that was so powerful seeing a mother be ambivalent because it spoke to the way that I was feeling. And I think that's
Mhm.
totally normal, but that's totally disavowed in our society. And
Yeah.
I was just wondering, you know, how did you depict ambivalence? Like, what was that process for you? Because I feel like it's so challenging to do.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. I guess like that's my main goal in the job that I do, because I guess like we are so hard to define, right? We're so hard to define every question. And I honestly, I'm not kidding. I've been struggling with this all my life. I guess all of us. But these basic questions about what you like, what is your personality, I'm always confused about, because I don't know. I'm always changing.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm of course I have very like clear politics. But then I always like to see the other side of the coin and where they're coming from, and trying to see like where's the seed of evil, where it comes from. And there's always this, I love that in fiction, and that's my favorite kind of stories.
Yeah.
And so to me, I had it very clear. There's definitely not, it's very impossible to have like a like decisive, like one-sided decision. There's always grace, and there's always chance to regret, and there's always chance to find a middle point. I guess like only death is the only one that doesn't allow you to do it, right? So for example, I did it, and I'm not a mom, so it was a lot of investigation. I mean, started with, I also have to say that I started writing it when I lost my mom.
Hmm.
So that made me have a huge process that I guess every human being goes through when they lose their mom, about humanizing her, seeing all of their colors that you usually don't see, because you only see your mom from your daughter standpoint. So then when I started trying to ask all those questions that I didn't do, when she was alive, about like all the other things that she would I liked or whatever. You know that basic process of humanizing and giving individual life to a mom. I had it. So then from there it started, and then of course a lot of interviews, a lot of investigation, and I found this book that is a very beautiful book, and it hasn't been re-released, called Mothers Who Live. I have it around there, but
Really?
Mothers That Live. It's a British book, and I was writing Huesera while I was in the UK for a year. So I found it, I bought it. It was like a second hand. There's no re-editions. I think it's just one edition from the 90s. And it's this woman
Mm.
that actually later, her name is Rosemary Jackson, and she actually later wrote a book about uses of fantasy to talk about politics. So it was very specific, and so
Yeah.
I think she's actually a woman who left her family. So then she investigated a lot of characters in fiction, like Dollhouse or Kramer contra Basic Kramer, like main like big films and theater and books that talk about figures that leave their daughters or sorry, their siblings. No, sorry,
Their children?
their children. Sorry, so amazing. And also interviews women that have taken that decision. And one of them really stick with me, and it made me think of my grandma, because it was this woman that this, and I guess this is the most basic, like the most usual one. That is like she took that decision. That doesn't mean she doesn't want a relationship.
Mm.
There should be ways for women that can't really have a huge struggle with that domestic life, or like having in contact every day with their children, but then they still want contact in certain way, like maybe the weekends, as many men do,
Exactly.
as
Yeah.
many men do. And it's just that there's just this openness to have satellite relationships with of other kind with your children. That's almost impossible,
Yeah.
to even see it. It's like it's completely like yes or no, like either you go and you're dead for everyone, or you stay 100% and this is your whole life, at least. But those times, at least for my grandmother, and I guess in many places of the world, is still the way, and and to me that was beautiful, because to me the sense of the end of Huesera is not about, you can still see her love towards her baby,
Yeah.
and you can still see that there's a huge connection there. And the fact that she takes this decision now, it doesn't mean that she's never going to come back, that she doesn't have a chance to create another kind of relationship with that child. And I guess that was part of the radical thing that I wanted to portray, that it's not supposed to be like a complete abandonment, or like, it's not supposed to be like that. And actually, one of the producers of the film, like kind of like a, yeah, like he's a one part of our Peruvian community, because he's a Mexican Peruvian. I know he has this kind of relationship with his wife, like she's a
Mhm.
woman that has a satellite relationship with their kids. And it's a beautiful thing, and I think he loved the film because of that as well, because he was like, this is also fair, and this
Yeah.
is also okay, and to
Yeah.
me was, I'm sure these relationships exist, and many of us have these kind of figures in our families. Like I have an aunt that had that kind of relationship with the children, but it's not very portrayed.
No.
Hmm.
No, and totally vilified. I mean, there's
Yeah.
sort of an impossibility in thinking that that's like available as an option.
Yeah.
And yet, as you said, many, many, many men do it all
Yes,
the
like
time.
once a month or like once a
Yeah.
year, and they're
Yeah,
still the parents,
exactly.
right? And it's like kind of like, why? Like, why can't women really find also that middle point?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's. Mhm.
It was profoundly radical that you portrayed that. And, another thing that was deeply radical about the film was Valeria's queerness. I mean, that was just so revelatory. And I think that, the denial of female sexuality or maternal sexuality, most specifically, I mean, to then introduce this queer dimension to her character, I've never seen that in a horror film
Oh.
before. I really haven't. So I was totally delighted and blown away. And the scene where she's having sex with her partner with Octavia,
Yeah.
when you see her pregnant belly while they're having queer sex, I mean, that was like mind blowing.
That image was so important for us. Like it was like we need to be able to see the belly and yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was amazing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Of
Like,
course, of course. You know, like to me, I guess like queerness has been around. I feel very lucky that has been around myself since I was like 15, 16. Like, and that was what I was drawn to. Like some of my favorite films and friends, like there in all of that. And I guess that always gave me this sense of freedom, you know,
yeah,
that there was like this like marked path, you know, that we're supposed to take, and it's super scary if you don't take it. But then like, at least in my eyes, I feel like I feel very fortunate that I had like always these like parallel lines where it's like all of this is also possible.
yeah,
And to me, that's love. You know, that's really the meaning of love. Like, don't be scared. If you don't go this path, you're gonna be okay, because you have examples of people that are so happy and have like happy lives, but they're completely out of those like lines, you know, of like what you're supposed to be as a woman, you know. And I wanted to give that love to the character, you know. And you could see she had that since she was a teenager. So, and I guess like once you see it, it's kind of like They Live, like John Carpenter's film. Like you
yeah,
can't stop seeing it, you know. Like you have it there, and even if you kind of sell out and you're trying to like tell yourself like this like normative life is for you, if you've seen it and if you lived it, is there's always gonna be this voice there like, well, but there's also this thing, and if it's part of your identity, you can't deny it, you know. And if you keep denying it, I guess it's a reason of like night sweats and panic, you know.
yeah,
And so it's part of like the big crisis that is inside of Valeria, right? Like, and
yeah,
she, like that Huesera comes as a teacher in a way, you know, to tell her like you can't deny all of this about you, you know, and it's okay. And, you know, and you can find a way to be happy with all of these areas of yourself, you know.
yeah.
So it was super important. And then that image, it was really for us like very radical image, you know. I also feel like I haven't seen this before, and this is completely fair. Why do we struggle so much about sexuality with pregnant women, you know? And not only pregnant women, mothers, literally. Like there's something that once you become a mother, your sexuality is like canceled, you know, or denied. And there's actually so many like, you know, like stupid like ideas of like pregnant women not being able to have sex, you know, and there's something very sacred about it. So for us, it was like with my DP, like this is one of the images of the film that, you know, that should be, you know, iconic for us, you know, at least in the
Yeah.
making. We struggled because our prosthetic, um, the guy that was in charge of prosthetics really didn't do a great job. I have to be very honest. And on the day, it looked terrible, and we were like, "Oh my god!" And we didn't have money for VFX, so we were like, "Dude, this is such an important image. We've been so clear since the beginning." So we were literally, and I was so close with the actresses. I'm still very close. We're friends, and they were super comfortable during the whole scene. It was like really a very beautiful scene to shoot, and we were literally finding where the camera could be that it could sell, you know, like it could
Yeah.
look like. And we think like, oh my god, I'm so thankful we found it, you know, where it's clear, it works. It like we didn't needed a big visual effect to pull it out, pull it off. So yeah, like, and very happy it worked out.
That's amazing. I don't know why it's so hard to do prosthetic like pregnant, but I've had the
Oh
exact
my
same
god, yeah,
experience.
you really need
It's like, why
yeah,
is
I
it
mean,
so hard?
yes, it's so hard. I mean, in the one on the bathtub, we managed it to do it, you know,
Yeah,
but it's hours of preparation.
right.
And yeah, and then yeah, like honestly, I had very amazing crew members, very focused and like completely connected with the film. But some of the other figures were not really. They were like, oh, this is a first feature. We shouldn't like take so care so much of it. You know, it was very difficult to navigate as a first
Yeah,
time director, and that was one of the relationships that I really struggled with. And it has to do again sometimes like with, yeah, with this position of being a woman just starting, and you don't receive that care, you know, that many other projects maybe receive.
yeah,
And that was one of the lessons, you know, like maybe it's better. Many of my areas were like with women, or like you know, like queer friends, you know, that had really took care of their job. But some of the other areas with like more experimented people, they didn't care, they didn't took care of the project, you know. And
yeah,
that's one of lesson that is like, it's way better to always bring all of your friends, all the community that's really gonna care for the project. That's always gonna be better, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, I think. It's especially, I don't know, I find it's especially true in special effects. Like it's such a male-dominated field, and I think it's
Really.
cracking open, and that's so
Yes,
exciting, but it's really challenging.
it's really challenging, and there's very few ones, most of them men, that do it,
Yeah.
and they don't share the information between them, and it's really an area that it's very hard to navigate, you know. And
Yeah.
I used to work actually in prosthetics, like workshops when I started, you know, and when I was a teenager, and I don't know, like it's a world that is hard to navigate,
Yeah.
100%. A little bit like cinematography, you know, it's like this thing
Yeah.
that has to do with like technical stuff, I guess. And there's
Totally.
like this very stupid ideas that it like that belong in men's hands, you know.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Did you face any pushback in like from producers or anything with showing that image? Like it's so powerful and so unique. Like I've never seen anything like that, and it's such a
Oh no.
linchpin of the film. And I wondered like I mean you were putting a taboo image on screen, and I was wondering like
Wow.
did you get any pushback for that?
Well, okay, I have to start saying that I first started developing the film with this producer that on a moment told us that he thought this film was not going to be successful because he thought we were trying to speak about a fear that was not common for women, that it was like he was basically saying that we were the exception and this was not going to resonate with most of women, and that we were making a big deal out of something that was very small, literally. I ended
Oh
up
my
firing
God.
him, thank God, because that
Thank God.
usually
I don't think he
oh my
got
God,
it.
lucky because our new producers were women and actually a queer producer, so they never struggled with it. They actually loved it. So yes, yeah, at the end, like it was kind of something that we all loved, you know. And then even
Amazing.
like even distributors and later, I guess like everybody that like you know for good or worse, like in many other ways, you know. But in that sense of like the identity of the film and the images and the themes, everyone embraced that, you know, and
That's
everybody
incredible.
pushed it. So we were very, even the Mexican Film Institute, that
Hmm.
they usually were usually like they never support a lot of genre films, like, but then like I I got the support of the Mexican Film Institute in a moment where it's like very female lead, and we were really embraced by it. So I'm always very thankful with them. Mhm.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. And yeah, I was wondering like when the speaking about this producer who felt that nobody would like relate to it. That's so wild to me. But when you were making it, were you thinking about, it's probably not an either or, but were you thinking more about women who felt like as your primary audience or who you were maybe making the movie for? Were you thinking about women who felt pressured to become mothers, or were you thinking about mothers watching the movie? I mean, probably all of it, but I'm curious about the way that you were like thinking about your audience for this.
Yeah, you know, like honestly, I guess of course for a lot of I guess women, you know, and people that can get pregnant, and on a on a point, and I love like a lot of people, especially men, tell me like, oh, I'm not gonna show it to my pregnant wife or something like that, and I'm like, well, actually the film is made for them, you know, it's exactly for them. So to me, I love when moms like, and honestly, we had a this was a surprise, but we had a lot of audience of women in their 50s 60s that are not the
Really?
usual audience in for horror movies.
Wow.
A lot, even in Los Angeles we had a screening, and a lot of uh, Latina women in their 50s, 60s, you know, that you could tell that they've been mothers for a long time, love the film. And that to me was
Amazing.
beautiful. Like we loved it. The actress and I, we were there like surrounded by this like group of women that, you know, like it was just like, oh my God, this is beautiful. This is why we made the film for, you know? But then
Yeah.
like honestly, I guess like apart from like the specifics of motherhood, I really do think like it can be for anyone, you know,
Yeah.
in the sense that society really pushes most of people, even like men, you know, in many terms of masculinity, to do a lot of things that maybe profoundly they don't want.
Yeah.
um, and many people that haven't been able to, you know, come out of normative lifestyles, and they're locked there, very unhappy, you know,
Yeah.
and that I guess that and anyone could have a Huesera, and
Yeah.
it was also like we never thought of it just for a very like niche specific audience. We thought like it could resonate with many people. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And how did you decide for your first feature to tackle the taboos surrounding motherhood?
So I was doing horror shorts for a long time and
Mhm.
sci-fi, and I knew by then, like when I was like in my fourth short film or something, that making a feature was gonna take years of my life. And because of interviews or like knowing other directors, I was like, okay, I need to pick a subject that I can keep on being in love with because I
Yeah.
don't want to drop it.
Yeah.
And so when I started, I mean, it was like around 2015 that I read The Legend of La Huesera, and I was struggling with the loss of my mom, and I was asking the questions about my grandma. So the thing was so strong, and also I had like a partner back then, and I, for a moment, thought about like maybe dropping film and like going to a more normal life and even like becoming my mom. Like I had that moment, of
Yeah,
deciding,
of
and of course
course.
I didn't know. I mean, that moment it didn't make sense at all, and but I could have made that decision, and I guess all of those things were so important in my life that I was like, okay, this is the theme I want to talk about, and I know I'm gonna keep obsessed with it, and I still am. Actually, the Hand That Rocks a Cradle that I just shot, it also touches upon some of these themes. So
Hmm.
I guess it's a theme that I can keep on doing. I can keep repeating because I'm still obsessed, and now with how the world is, and like how like society is like pushing back. I guess like, it's very relevant, and it's gonna keep being a renegotiation always. It's not that to me, and for you, I'm sure it's like this is something that is already like kind of like obvious, like we know that about our lives and about like society. But I guess like it's very easy to like it's very easy to kind of like be scared about it, or like to try to embrace it openly, and I guess there's always going to be this pushback on society, and I guess there's always going to be the need to repeat the same thing, to say like, okay, this is really an important thing to talk about, because it's usually a taboo.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think like I don't know. Every time I make a film, I think to myself, like, where am I going to place the horror? And I think the normal place to place the horror in a maternal horror movie is about like a bad mom. That's the horrific thing. A mom
Yeah,
abandoning her child. That's horrific,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But for you, you so elegantly place the horror on her staying and on her not
Mm.
pursuing her own joy. And that's where the horror lies.
Oh, thank you. I got the chills. That's very beautiful to put it in that words. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the horror was in the other side.
yes, exactly. And it was so surprising and so beautifully constructed. And I, did you know that's how the movie was going to end when you started to write it? Or did you sort of like find your direction there?
I mean, like we had it very clear that, like this progress through the writings, the progress of the monster had to be connected with this self-gaslight
Hmm.
process that we go through, so
Yeah.
every time that Valeria was avoiding that, those feelings or those emotions, that's when the monster had to appear. So literally those moments where you're denying yourself and you're like trying to say like, no, 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 I really love my life and this is all perfect, when you're trying to really like lie to yourself, that's the monster. So that was very clear since the first drafts of the film, the horror
Mm.
had to be on that side. um so we did have clarity about it. It shouldn't be about the like literally like the baby. It was not about the baby. It was more about her body and her identity, so that was part of the core. But I do have to say that I'm a big believer of the creative process in a collective manner. So there was definitely like an evolution on the film in every part of the process, So
Yeah.
the comment or the theme got clearer, throughout its processes, because we had many, many, many things around it for many time, and then there was like a um how do you say, like a filter, of, because I guess in horror it's very important to pick some things, like many times in a 2 hour film, 1 hour and a half film, it's so hard to pull so many of the themes, and so all of the, especially in a first feature, right? You want to talk
Yeah.
about so much things. So then there was, I'm very thankful that I went through the process of like, okay, which are the most important, what's the core of the film? And that what you're saying is that's really the core. So many of the other things had to go away.
Yeah. Yeah. And you absolutely insist on Valeria's inner life and that she's the center of the film. Like, as you said, the baby is almost never on screen. And I found that to be so profound because for me, one of the most shocking experiences of that shift from pregnancy to postpartum is when you're pregnant, everybody's attention is on you. Like
Mm.
you're walking down the street and people are asking you about like how far along and your family. Like everybody is so focused on the pregnant woman and sort of like
Yeah,
idolizing her. And then in the space of an hour, you become totally disposable and all the focus is on the baby.
yeah,
And it really never shifts back. Like you are that child's mom. And I
yeah.
think that like loss of identity is was for me one of the hardest things to navigate. And I think your film, it's so specifically not about the child. And I thought like how did you shot list that? How did you think about camera placement? Because it's very intentional.
Oh, thank you, Ariel. Well, it's, as you're saying, it was super intentional. We so we were thinking about like, so like there's even like a symbolic thing about when the baby appears for the first time, that is inside of a fridge, and to me it was, that's the first time we see the baby really on the film, no, after
Yeah,
that,
because you
and
have it
it's,
on the little monitor.
yeah, 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 well, yeah, in a little monitor, but like really like on screen, like
Yeah.
being seen. It was that moment where it's inside of this cold and very dark place, and to us it was very symbolic in the sense that when mothers are not able to see their inner conflicts and their, trying to understand their emotions and their identity, like when they decide to avoid all of that, many times you put the babies in the darkest and coldest places, right? Like you're not even able to see them, like as human beings, because you're not even able to do it, and to us it was very symbolic that when Valeria understands all her struggles, that's the first moment that she's really able to see her baby, and that's when she's able to see like, okay, I have to work this out, because if not, this is gonna end up in a terrible way, and of course it's a horror movie, so we took it to like the verge of death, but in many times that's where parents put us, when they're not working with themselves and they're not understanding what kind of freedom or what kind of like liberties, and they're not even able to embrace of their own lives, and I guess that puts them in a violent manner, towards the relationship with their children, and so for us it was very important that this is all about Valeria's side and gaze and what she's looking at, and she's not being able to look at herself, so until she's able to, that's when she's going to be able to see the baby, and apart from that, of course, there was this radical decision of like, we stop looking at mothers when they become sorry, a women when they become mothers, right? And literally like in a hospital, like all the attention is completely taken up to the baby, and then the mother body and the mom itself, like themselves, like they're being abandoned there, and it was very funny because even like the nutritional the Nutrition Institute here in Mexico, like a public hospital, watched the film and they invited me to give a talk, because for them it was very radical to talk about how they can't stop looking and paying attention at the women after giving birth, and they thought that it was very evident the way we shot it, and it was, to me, it was so beautiful, and it was like, well, yeah, it
That
was very intentional.
that is incredible because, my very first prenatal appointment, I walked into a doctor's office and had an experience of not being the patient in the doctor's office.
Yeah.
And that was really alarming. I was like like the Tupperware that the patient was
Oh my
inside.
God.
And that shot, I mean, it blew my mind when when it's the mother-in-law, the husband, and
Oh,
Valeria at the doctor's office, and you
yes.
only show the mother-in-law and the husband
Yes.
and the doctor, and they're talking about Valeria's mental
Oh
health
my
and
God,
she's off
Ariel.
screen. I was like,
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing you're saying that, because the DP and I, she and I, we really struggle a lot with that scene, because location was horrible. We lost that location we wanted like 2 days before, and we were like, "This is so ugly." We had no depth, but then I was like, "Well, it's not about how beautiful it is. It's about like literally what's in the frame and what's outside." And Valeria is outside of it, and they're talking about her. And then when she appears, she's like little in one corner. So to me, that's one of the best like cinematic scenes of the film, but it's really ugly visually because we had a horrible location. But then
Well,
like she was like, "Oh, we should cut it," and I was like, "No, it's really one of the best ones. You know, we have to keep it."
oh, come on. And also the naked statues of the
Yeah.
women behind the doctor. I love that location. I'm going to vouch for
Oh,
that
thank you so
location.
much. Thank you for saying that.
That is such a funny space. Like I laughed out loud when I saw those
Yeah, because this
statues
is
behind
kind
the
of like,
doctors.
yeah, like sanctification of female's body, but it's like so much violence there.
It resonated so deeply. Like that is the experience of being in the doctor's office. I mean, that was like a
Oh my
master
God,
class
that's
in shot
horrible.
selection.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I do want to talk about the baby in the fridge too, because
Of course.
I
Yeah,
wa
yeah,
I was like, she went there. It's like,
yeah.
it's amazing. And I think that's the kind of image that only a horror movie allows. Like if that was in a, that would never be in a drama. Like
Yeah,
you can go to the logical limit of the metaphor and like stay there and just do the
yeah.
craziest things. So how did I mean, I know you talked about the isolation and the cold, and that's an amazing thing to think about, but were you kind of, to me, that moment was so beautifully juxtaposed with one of my favorite shots in the film is the tripling mirrors of her looking at
Mm,
herself with such dead eyes while she's expressing milk. And
yeah.
it really seems to me like I know so many women who are like brilliant lawyers or doctors, and they have children, and because of the cost of childcare in the United States, they stay home and they're,
Mm,
going brain dead. And it's like you can see her doing that and just like shutting herself off. And then
yeah,
in that moment, that like ultimate act of violence
yeah,
shakes her out of it, and she decides to save herself and save the baby.
yeah, 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 yeah. Ah, like it's like okay, so throughout the investigation and only understanding ourselves, like there's so much um I guess like violence, on the thought process, of identity loss and fracture that is such a taboo to talk about, right?
Yeah,
Like I guess like so many women go through these literally images of throwing their babies out of the balcony. Like I think that's so common, but
yeah,
nobody wants to talk about it because there's so much anger apart from love. The love is completely true, but then also the anger and the frustration and the fears are also true, and I guess like we also wanted to give like justice to those feelings, that are such a one of the biggest taboos out of motherhood. Like there's moments where uh women and mothers regret, and they wish they didn't have all of that, that they haven't taken that decision. So we were like, we have to go there, all the way there, and we have this moment where Valeria thinks she threw the baby out of the window, and we were like, we have to go there. And that's the beautiful of horror movies, they
yeah,
allow you, as you were saying, to go there.
yeah,
And of course it was this big symbolism for us, like that's maybe the moment where you're able to see that you have another human being there, and that you have to work with yourself, and and,
yeah,
and and if you have the chance to do that, maybe that's gonna create a relationship that is really gonna be just for both sides, right? And to me, that's the climax, that's the real climax of the film.
mhm,
Everything that comes later, it's a beautiful thing that horror allows you to do, like to go to this like surreal another dimension world, where Valeria is completely broke apart, and all of that imagery of the witches, all of that comes from that moment, of
yeah,
like being able to see yourself, and being able to see yourself in the mirror and understand like, oh my God, I have to work this out,
yeah,
because if not the baby and myself, we're not gonna survive it. And I love what you're saying. Like I guess like I always tell that DP Nur that she has like a doctor, like like she's like a master of mirrors, and
uh-huh,
reflections. She's so great in that. And there's so much it's so meaningful in Huesera because there's definitely like a identity fractured, you know, and there's like this many parts of yourself are completely distorted, and when you're not when you're not able to see yourself, you know, and understand that diversity in yourself, uh so much violence can come out of it. So it's very
Yeah.
beautiful that you put it in that word.
It was really, yeah, I mean, in so many instances, this movie just like felt like this balm for my soul and for the experience that I was having because, these conversations just don't happen and these images do not get put out into the world. And I think that feeling of like desperate isolation could be mitigated by people just talking about it and being honest about it and mothers not feeling like they're the only ones feeling these things
Yeah,
because that's what makes them so terrifying. And so I
yeah, yeah,
think
yeah.
that's what I love about horror is that it allows you to say the things you're not supposed to say so that we can all recognize that it's a shared experience, you
Yes,
know?
yes, 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 yes. And unfortunately many women think they're the only ones and they're monstrous, like there's
Mhm.
like a
Yeah.
complete like belief that they're wrong, you know, and they're evil, you know,
Yeah.
and I guess once you open up, it's like, oh my God, like this is actually so common, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the only time when you can actually start having like a positive relationship to your own new identity or a part of your
Exactly.
identity as a mother because it's like looking in the mirror in that scene. If it's you don't recognize yourself. And so only when you allow yourself to be a full person with a myriad of feelings around this experience can you actually start to like enjoy your child.
Exactly, exactly. And to be able to say like, you know, at this moment, I don't feeling it. I need to leave you alone. I need to
Yeah.
leave you with someone else for a moment because I losing it, you know,
Yeah.
and that's okay, you know?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally normal, but nobody knows that because nobody says it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I was wondering too, the theme of this issue is lore, and I was thinking about folklore and how like central and sort of uh it seems that the whole movie was kind of born out of the myth of La Huesera, and I was wondering like um how you came across it and maybe if you could summarize the myth for people who might not know what La Huesera is about.
Yeah, of course. So someone gave me, I think, yeah, a friend of mine, very radical friend that actually she gave me these like women, men, and
Men,
chainsaws.
Women, and Chainsaws.
Yes, she
Yes,
gave that
yes.
book to me, and then later she gave me this book called "Women That Run with Wolves," that
Yep.
is written by this psychoanalyst from the border, Clarissa Pincola, and that book analyzes the myth of La Huesera. And I read it when around that time where I lost my mom,
Hmm.
and it really resonated with me. It was not only the film; like I also wrote. I had a band back then, and I wrote a couple songs about it, and kind of stayed with me. And basically, the myth is about this elder woman that is looking for bones in the desert, and she's putting together this skeleton. And then throughout a ritual with fire, she gives life to this creature, and then this creature is able to run free. And it's like a mirror of herself, like of this young, free woman running through the desert, you know. And it's a very beautiful legend that really, like, out of Clarissa Pincola's analysis, she speaks about like this process of therapy, I guess, or I don't know the word, but of like looking for those pieces of yourself that many times you have very deep down, you know, like buried, and you don't want to see that they're monstrous, they're evil, they're supposed to be wrong. So it's kind of like going through that painful process, like, because of course throughout the legend, like this woman is elder, is like she's struggling with her body, and it's painful to go through that very strong physical process, you know, of how do you say, like digging out, you know.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's kind of like it speaks about these difficult, painful, exhausting processes of trying to understand pieces of yourself, and then going through the beautiful process of like a ritualistic process of giving meaning or like understanding to it, you know,
Yeah.
and setting it free in a way. So it's very different, of course, as a film, but I thought it was a beautiful card. to keep for
Yeah.
the film, like they literally, of course, we work it out in a cinematic way of like bone fractures and like something that could be literally tangible, visual, that had a very specific sound that created like a physical reaction to it. So little by little, we started connecting the heart of the legend to the specifics of a character like Valeria, a woman from this social class in Mexico City where rituals and shamanism is literally everyday bread. Like you go to the market in the morning and like the shaman, like the curanderas are there, and they're like, it's a service they sell, and it's very easy to go through it. And you have family members that have been part of it always. So it's kind of like a very common thing. It's not even like a very like a supernatural weird thing. In I guess in the Mexico City, like middle class, like middle low class also is pretty common. And so to us it all made sense for the character, and it kind of made um a portrayal of a very specific way of living in a specific place. So it
Yeah.
kind of like got together in a organic way out of a lot of work, throughout the writings of the script.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about like how the bone woman functions in the story? Because, in the myth, it sounds like she's more of a constructive force, like building something out of these
Yeah.
fragments. And then in the film, it seems to be more of a destructive force. But where you place those moments you were mentioning were like where Valeria was disconnecting from her truth and her identity? Is that were you kind of
Yes.
placing those moments there?
Yeah, there was like an crescendo, that we knew we needed to achieve. So of course, the first one comes that first night where she can sleep after the news that she's pregnant, right? And there's like all this happiness that is supposed to be the right thing. But then, when you have these night moments where you can't sleep and you're kind of doubting a decision, that needed to be the first time. And
Yeah.
then like every time that we said is closer, the first time she's out in another building, then she crawls into her apartment, then she's below her bed, and then she takes over her body. So it's every
Yeah.
time it's closer. And literally, like when her ex-girlfriend appears, that had to be a moment where La Huesera appears, that's a
Yeah.
moment where La Huesera is a painful teacher, because she's kind of showing you where you don't want to see, you
Yeah.
know, and that creates fractures in Valeria, like this painful moment of being like, I'm being broken inside, because I'm not being able to see this, and I need to find a way to reconnect my body parts. And
Absolutely.
so it kind of like really we kept the idea of pieces of yourself, like this past, these little moments that happen that are so meaningful of your identity. So all of that was connected with a body fracture. And then at the end it becomes like a very collective huge manner. But it is connected with a legend in the sense that there's like pieces, like bone pieces, like one after one after one, and then there's a whole skeleton together, and there's a ritual, that kind of like gives the answer to the character.
Yeah.
So in that sense, there's kind of like a progress in the legend and in the film that mirror themselves.
Yeah. And how did you land on the image of the spider?
Okay, so that was actually, I'm a big fan of Louis Bourgeois, like this sculpture, French sculpture, since a long time ago, honestly. And she has this beautiful analysis and connection between the spider figure and motherhood that
Yeah.
completely made sense for the film. And I love the texture of her work, and all of that was like, this is the right thing, like aesthetic wise for the film. And that's something that really completely made sense. Like, it's just, okay, we have to keep the bone fractures but also spiders, and we can't connect them in a way, like. And then that's the whole image of these female bodies, disembodied female bodies at the end, that we had no money, we had no visual effects, I don't like CGI. There was so many aspects to it, and literally I remember one night that I had the idea of like, oh my god, bodies, that's it. And I pitched it to the producers, and they were like, oh my god, this is amazing. They were very supportive. And out of that, that's how we like got this amazing choreographer, and we started working with like dancers. It was a beautiful process, really.
Oh my God, I love Louise Bourgeois, and now you say it, and I'm
Oh
like,
my
how did I not see that? That is so
oh my
perfect. How
god.
did I miss it? That's incredible. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's so amazing.
Yeah.
And you also worked with the choreographer and like no special effects for the big body monster, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had like prosthetics that also that was another one that yeah, it didn't work out as we designed it,
Yeah.
because of like, yeah, bad deliveries of certain team members. But then at the end of the day, the work of the dancers was so amazing,
Yeah.
and I had an incredible editor. It like, oh my god, and of course we had to go through a horrible, super long process of VFX that it was not sculpting anything, but removing, erasing, because these bodies were not supposed to have identity. They're in the
Yeah.
process of winning it, so we had to erase their faces. It was a very long and horrible, one of the most difficult process of making Huesera, to be honest. But then, like, having that, like, the main thing was there, it was these bodies in these woods in Mexico City, in Chapultepec, that we found this beautiful area of this kind of like trees that look like spider webs. So the main thing was there. We had
Yeah.
it on camera.
Yeah.
And I'm so
Wow.
glad we found it, because it would have been so difficult to create it another way with the
Yeah.
budget we had.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, so true story, when I found out that you were directing the remake of Hand That Rocks the Cradle, I audibly screamed. So, can you tell us anything about, I know you just finished shooting last
Yes.
week. Is there anything that you can tell us about it?
Like, honestly, I was a little bit scared with the whole like studio system, like Hollywood. At first, I was like kind of doubtful about it. But then, honestly, I'm so grateful. It's been an incredible process. Um, I lost a, there was a very difficult process for me of a second feature I was gonna do in Mexico City.
Mm.
It landed in bad hands, like all of these aspects of everything that surrounds the creative. It's really the most difficult thing out of films, right? Like producers and money, all of that. And it was very heartbreaking, maybe the most difficult process I've gone through my career. And then
Yeah.
I had this opportunity, and I was like, okay, this team has been wonderful. The whole process, like the executive of 20th Century loves Huesera. Like the first talk I had with him, he talked of Huesera for an hour, like every detail. I was like, okay, this is a real fan, So he likes my style. And then he was like, well, we've been wanting to remake this movie for a long time. We've been waiting for a pitch that we like. And then the idea stayed in my mind, and I got an idea. And I was like, I'm just going to pitch it, And then they loved it. And since then, I have to say they've been so supportive. Like
Wow.
every part of the process, I've been kind of scared of like, oh my God, where is like the hard hand of the studio going to come? But then until now, touch wood, they have been extremely supportive with me. In every sense, I love my team. They were all so involved. It's more a complete reimagination, like
Cool.
again, we're keeping the heart of the original film. It's a very legendary film, and we all know it. So I think the worst thing you could do with a remake is try to remake it. It's like you need to do a whole different thing. So that's what we're making. I really hope people like it. I don't know, like I've been loving the process of it, and that's to me the most important. And I really trust that we've been following our instincts. The cast has been amazing as well. My DP, I'm like in awe by his work, and I don't know, like it's been a very like it's been a school for me, 100%,
Yeah.
and I guess like it's coming through again, digging in these amazing characters, and all their gray and light and dark areas, and that's to me what I want to do, and that's definitely something that I'm having the chance to do in this film again. So I'm very excited about it. Really, it's been wonderful. Yeah,
We're so excited. I mean, I will be there on opening day. I'm so
please.
excited about it. And how is it
Please.
working with Micah, who's a big fan favorite of ours?
Oh my God, she's incredible. She's a pro. And I told her the last day of shooting, I was like, she's always gonna be a mystery for me. She and also Mary Elizabeth Winstead, they're incredible. Like I have no words. And it's this thing from directors, that we don't do that job, of being in
Mhm.
front of the camera, of taking, the bone and flesh and heart of these kind of characters. And to me, it's always gonna be a mystery how they do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because they're talking with them like about like this scene, like very specific things, and then they go in it, and there's so many layers about them, and that I don't know. It's beautiful. They love their characters. They took so much care of them, and I mean, forever grateful with both of them.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see it. And I'm so delighted that you got the chance to make a studio movie and that your career, I'm sure, will just be,
Oh,
you know,
thank
a
you.
huge upward trajectory. Couldn't have been to a better person. And
Thank you
your
so much.
your stories need to be out in the world. And I'm
Thank
so
you.
grateful to be able to talk with you about one of my favorite movies ever made.
Oh,
And
thank you, Ariel. I really hope
really,
out of this I get the chance to direct one of my scripts again. That's what I'm working on. So
that's
that's what hopefully comes next, you know, like I'm going to be able to go back to a very personal authorial story that I'm writing with a Chilean co-writer.
wow.
It's called Ornamento. It's an adaptation of a Colombian book. So that's something that we're working on at the moment as well to be the next one. So I guess I feel very grateful. It's been a very beautiful process of like understanding what a studio movie is. But I also love the independent um, oh, sorry. Um, I gotta. Can you see me? Oh
I
yeah.
can see,
I also
yes.
love the independent world of it, you know,
Yeah.
and I hope I can keep on doing both.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. I want to see all the different iterations of your work. And
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Of
And
course,
I'm
Ariel,
so
it's been
excited.
magnific. I love all your questions. Thank you. It's just so thoughtful. And this is the kind of conversations I love to have because it brings me back to the roots and the heart of what I do.